Hello, and welcome to the 2021 Farm Journal Foundation Speaker Series, coming to you live from Des Moines, Iowa at the World Food Prize. My name is Tricia Beal. I'm CEO of Farm Journal Foundation, and we want to thank all of you for joining us today. Our theme for this year is building food systems that nourish, the nexus between agriculture and nutrition. For those of us who are engaged in this nexus on a daily basis in the value chain of food and nutrition, there's a great clarity around the interdependency and the interconnected relationship of agriculture and nutrition. But this is not always represented in the ways that we implement policy, the way we support our communities and implement programs. When we began planning for this event early this year, our team was so excited about the panelists that we're bringing together today because of the impact of their organizations and these people as individuals. These panelists and our moderator, Roger Thoreau, represent some of the best minds on this subject of this nexus and how that we can create a system that provides affordable, wholesome food for all people. I am pleased to welcome and thank our more than 20 university partners and student organizations that are joining us today, mostly to the hundreds of students across the United States and abroad who are with us. You're the future, and we really want you to participate in this conversation today. We invite you to use the chat feature if you have questions for our panel, and this session is being recorded and will be available on our online platforms after the event. So now it's my pleasure to pass the reins to my partner in this program, Roger Thoreau, who is a renowned author, seasoned journalist, and is currently serving as scholar in residence at Auburn University's Hunger Solutions Institute.
Thank you very much, Tricia. We're actually sitting right next to each other in Des Moines, where the World Food Prize is happening. So that's why we're kind of teaming up. We're like newscasters. So this is exciting. It's a new format for us. So thanks to Zoom for allowing this. So a very warm and enthusiastic welcome and a big thank you to all of you joining us this afternoon, evening, morning, perhaps, wherever you may be. For this next installment of our 2021 University Speaker Series, and a special and particular welcome and thank you to all the students who are joining us today. Thank you, Tricia. Thank you very much for the very kind introduction. And of course, thanks to Farm Journal Foundation, all the sponsors and partner universities and colleges that Tricia mentioned and we showed on the screen for making this all possible. And for all you professors out there who have arranged class schedules and things, and again, to all the students who, are jumping in between classes and this event, so that's really great. So our theme, as Tricia said, throughout this series, I think for now, might be the third or fourth semester that we're working on this. Our theme throughout this series has been building food systems that nourish, the nexus of agriculture and nutrition. And it's precisely at this nexus where we find our greatest challenge today. How do we both nourish the planet and preserve and protect the planet at the same time? How do we meet this relentless demand for more nutritious food coming from an ever-increasing and ever more prosperous global population, while also safeguarding our environment and our biodiversity? For the very act of growing the food needed to feed us, to nourish us, takes a toll on our soils, waters, air, climate, animals, pollinators, habitats, our biodiversity, pushing us closer to our planetary limits. Success in this great challenge will depend on all of us. We all have a vital role to play in meeting this challenge. We can all contribute mightily to this battle to finally conquer hunger and malnutrition, wherever it may be. No matter what we are studying and where our careers may take us, no matter our skill set or our passion, each and every one of us can make a difference. And we can do this by starting now. There's no need to wait. We know what to do. We'd like this session today to be as interactive as possible. And since we're hosting this discussion in conjunction with the World Food Prize events, I think, Namakolo, you had made this suggestion in an earlier discussion. Let's start with this request or this question, particularly to the participating students. What do you think will be the innovations to capture the World Food Prize in the future. And you students kind of imagine what you're doing and what your skill set and passion may be. What can you yourselves be doing to envision yourselves as perhaps somebody being a future World Food Prize laureate? So if you can envision that, please type it in the chat box and we'll try to get to that later. And we can all see that and see what everybody is thinking. Our theme today, as Tricia said, is the interdependency between agriculture and nutrition. So it seems intuitive and obvious that agriculture and nutrition are intricately bound together. Of course, the food produced by agriculture should be as nutritious as possible. But far too often in the past, and still today, agriculture and nutrition have been and are considered separately far too often, even at times in opposition to each other in terms of policy, field implementation, and economic impact. So ending this separation, reinforcing the interdependency between agriculture and nutrition is now at the very center of all the discussions that we know and we've heard and we're observing, perhaps participating in, all these discussions that are taking place now and in the coming months about the need to transform our food system for healthy people and planet. It was certainly a hot topic at the recent United Nations Food System Summit, and it will be at the upcoming climate talks coming up in Glasgow in a week or two. It will be at the Nutrition for Growth Conference in Japan later this year, and at the African Union Summit. So kind of at all the gatherings of heads of states, of experts, of everybody pondering this great challenge that we have, this nexus, agriculture and nutrition, healthy people, healthy planet, is at the very crux of it all. So to explore the current challenges and examine the models of promise that we're seeing and progress, we've assembled this wonderful panel today featuring 3 individuals who have spent their careers, their lives at the intersection of agriculture and nutrition. Particularly for the students, you can have no better role models than these 3 people in terms of going forward and asking your questions. Well, what can we study? What career opportunities are out there? What is the inspiration for us going forward? They're all inspirations to me personally throughout my career, and also great sources along the way and support as I've been doing my writing. So joining us today are Dr. Kofi Boa, who's the founder and director of the Howard G. Buffett Foundation Center for No-Till Agriculture in Ghana. That's where Kofi joins us from. Kofi's parents were smallholder farmers, and he is one himself. He practices what he preaches about conservation agriculture. He really knows whereof he speaks while championing the development of smallholder agroecological farming. And we also have Dr. Namakolo Chovich, who is a senior research coordinator at the International Food Policy Research Institute, commonly known as IFPRI, for the CGIAR research program on agriculture for nutrition and health. She's also a registered nutritionist with the Health Professionals Council of South Africa, and she's also a leader of the Healthy Diets Coalition. So there's much that she'll be contributing to us. And I think, Nomakolo, you win the award for staying up the latest to join us. I think it's coming up, or it's nearly midnight or approaching midnight in Ethiopia. So thank you. We'll try to keep this as lively as possible to keep us all stimulated and awake through all this. So thank you, Namakola, for joining us. And we've also got the wonderful and the great Sean Baker. He's the chief nutritionist for the U.S. Agency for International Development, commonly known as USAID. In this position, he chairs the agency's Nutrition Leadership Council, oversees the vision and strategy of the agency's Center for Nutrition in the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security, and he coordinates other related efforts across USAID. Before becoming the first ever chief nutritionist at USAID, he was the first director of nutrition at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So, keeping up with Sean's firsts, he will be our first speaker today with our leadoff keynote address. We'll then follow with our panel discussion, and Sean will also be staying around and participating in that. So, Sean, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Roger, for that kind introduction. Thank you to Tricia and to the Farm Journal Foundation for putting this on, and my fellow panelists, Dr. Boa, Dr. Chovich. A real pleasure to be here. And thank you so much for everyone who's tuned in today. I think for probably all of us panelists, we, as Roger had said, we dedicated our life to this. So any opportunity we have to talk about nutrition and the links between agriculture and nutrition is a real pleasure. Before I dig into this interface between the food system or agriculture and nutrition, I wanted to set the stage about what is the burden of malnutrition and why I think those of us who are on the table are so deeply passionate about it. Malnutrition is responsible, or the underlying cause, of 45% of all young child deaths. That is absolutely stunning. 45% of all under 5 deaths. And for those children who survive malnutrition, we know we've undermined their optimal physical and cognitive development. So they may have survived, but we've not positioned them to thrive into the future. And therefore, really, certainly, I look at it at USAID that, in fact, good nutrition is foundational to everything else we care about, be it survival, further education, economic growth. And we also have come to a consensus of really understanding of either where the most damage is done in that 1,000-day window from conception through the child's second birthday for both the mother and the child, that's where the bulk of damage is being done, and that damage is irreversible. But I'm an optimist, and I say, actually, we know if we provide good nutritious food, health service, nutrition services, we lock in potential, that potential to survive, that potential to thrive, et cetera. So there are huge opportunities. And these opportunities are backed up by the evidence, Roger, as you said from the beginning. We actually know what to do. And in fact, these solutions are among the most cost-effective in all global development. Economists who are much smarter about running the numbers than I am estimate that every $1 invested in nutrition yields $16 in returns in the long term. So really, it's a win. If we step back, nutrition had become ascendant going back to the last global crisis we faced in 2007, 2008, the global food price crisis, which in fact gave birth to the US government Feed the Future program. But the crisis we're living through today, the COVID pandemic, to my mind, with 40 years of experience, is the gravest crisis to hit nutrition ever, because it's disrupting every system that families rely on to nourish their families everywhere at the same time. It's hitting livelihoods, so the ability to purchase nutritious food and access care is diminished. It's disrupting the health systems, the humanitarian systems, and their ability to provide health and nutrition services. The social protection programs have been stretched so that they cannot expand enough to meet that additional burden. And we know that, in fact, access to nutritious foods has really particularly been undermined. Well, access to staples has held up. And a collection of researchers across these different sectors, and Dr. Chovich was involved in this, under the Standing Together for Nutrition Consortium, tried to estimate, well, just what is the magnitude of these impacts? And it's estimated in the pessimistic scenario, which is probably the more likely one because of the time that the pandemic is rolling out, that we could be looking over the 2020-2022 timeframe of an additional 13.6 million children suffering wasting, which is the most deadly form of malnutrition. And that between this combination of increases in wasting and dropping off of access to nutrition services, we could be looking at over 280,000 additional child deaths. And that this will go into the long term with increases of children who have survived, but in fact are not growing optimally, who are stunted, and mothers who are suffering increased malnutrition and increased anemia. And it's estimated that we already were not on track to meet our World Health Assembly targets and our Sustainable Development Goal targets on nutrition. But this could really set us back, and it also increases the financial requirements to address the nutrition crisis and get us back up. And that is probably about $1.2 billion additional for the next 3 years. And if the COVID crisis hit us like a meteorite, we also know the world is facing a crisis, as you said at the top, Roger, that's been starting for many decades and will be for us longer. And that is the climate crisis, which similarly is undermining all these systems. And there are different estimates in terms of how much this is going to increase inequities, which are fundamental drivers of malnutrition, challenge our ability, the food supply, particularly the nutritious food supply, and in fact, put at risk the most vulnerable populations. We also know that, in fact, the global food system is a contributor to greenhouse gases. And I think this is where, to me, nutrition is really the human face of people suffering the impacts of climate change on the front lines. And those people who are suffering the impacts the most, particularly infants and young children, are those who've done nothing to contribute to the climate crisis we're all facing. There's another aspect of this that that I think is important to underscore for this audience. One of the paradoxes is that the very backbone of the food system, smallholder families across the globe, are also usually those most at risk of malnutrition and suffering the burden. And this creates this vicious cycle of the very people the world rely on to feed us, in fact, are not able to adequately nourish themselves, and that traps them into this vicious cycle of poverty, because if you survive malnutrition, you're more likely to, that is a predictor of poverty as much as poverty is a predictor of malnutrition. And we see, and this is where this interface between the food system and nutrition is so essential. If you look at the world before the pandemic, it was estimated that 3 billion people could not afford a healthy diet. And if you hone in on the most vulnerable groups, looking at infants and young children, from that 6-month period when breast milk alone is not enough, you need to make sure infants and young kids get nutrient-dense foods through 2 years of life. Fewer than 18% of infants and young children in low and middle income countries are getting a minimal acceptable diet. And we know that that affordability, that 3 million, again, some of Namokolo's colleagues from IFPRI have put together estimates that the pandemic is likely to increase the number of people who cannot afford a healthy diet by about 260 million or more. So clearly, and I think I'm going to paraphrase something that our laureate, Dr. Tilstead, said to me in an interview I was having with her earlier in the week. We have a food system that is feeding the world, but is failing to nourish the world. And it's certainly failing to nourish those populations, moms and kids in that 1,000-day window, who need nourishing food and nourishing services the most. Now, I may have painted a pretty grim picture, but at heart, I'm an optimist, and I think we are definitely up to the task if we join forces, because as you said at the get-go, we actually know the problem, we know the solutions. If we can generate the political will that translates into the financing necessary, we can work together and truly live up to the aspirations of the Sustainable Development Goal and put an end to malnutrition everywhere. As somebody, again, who's worked in this field for a long time, hearing the US President Biden at the UN General Assembly make a call to increase resources to fight food insecurity and malnutrition here in the US and abroad was incredibly inspiring. I think inspiring, obviously, for those of us in the US, but I think a demonstration of exactly the sort of political leadership we need. He announced a $10 billion multi-year investment to transform food systems, including $5 billion through Feed the Future, which is the flagship program of the US government to, in fact, transform food systems to address nutrition and also address in a way that makes sure that they're sustainable and rising to the moment to take into consideration what we need to do post-COVID, the climate crisis, ensure strong equity. And we've made a number of announcements underneath that large commitment, including how do we help address the funding gaps that small and medium enterprises face to access the right sorts of funding to be able to produce safe, affordable, nutritious food. How do we continue to invest in the evidence generation? And we've announced a new innovation lab on food systems for nutrition led by Tufts University, because I think as we transform food systems, partners like we have around the table and other, generating the evidence that countries can take and say, this is what we need to do based on the different trade-offs we need to make. We're also doubling down our efforts on fortifying food with essential nutrients, something that we take for granted here in the US, so that we can make sure the food system is delivering those essential nutrients. I wanted to, and as Roger, you said, it's an incredible year. The Food Systems Summit really, I think, put food systems and nutrition on the agenda in a way we've not seen it. COP26, obviously the strong links between the climate crisis and nutrition. And coming up early December, what for the nutrition is the equivalent of our big replenishment moment, Nutrition for Growth, being led by the government of Japan, where we're working across the world to try to get partners to come to the table with strong financial, political, programmatic commitments to really get us back on track to meet the world's targets for addressing nutrition. And I'm very pleased that the African Union is poised to adopt 2022 as the year of nutrition, so that this momentum is going to continue. This is not a flash in the pan, but a long-term commitment. Now, many of you around the table, and I'm so thrilled about the people having joined, you know, you may say, wow, this is such a daunting, overwhelming problem. What can I as an individual do? And I think, Roger, you started it off. I had the privilege of working for an NGO called Helen Keller International for a little over 19 years. And one thing you walk away with is a treasure trove of quotes. And when I'm faced with these incredibly daunting challenges where it seems very hard to say, well, what can I as an individual do? I turn to a quote from her, and I'm going to read it off my screen. I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do something that I can't do. And often when I speak to people, I think of 5 words, and particularly students who are at the beginning of their career, of things you can do. Learn, share, engage, give, and career. I think nutrition is poorly understood. So the more you learn about both the problem of malnutrition and all the solutions we have, the better. Then sharing that knowledge, because certainly stakeholders in any country, the more they understand about the problem and the solutions, the more they're ready to act, the more they're ready to support their appropriators to act. Engage. There are many opportunities to volunteer with organizations here in the US and abroad that do excellent work on agriculture, food, and nutrition. And then give. I spent most of my life working for nonprofits, and of course our lifeblood is large grants from foundations, from governments. But what truly is worth its weight in platinum are these private donations, even $5 a month, because that gives you the flexibility to address hard problems. It also is a vote of confidence in a broad set of stakeholders. And I was going to end up with career, because particularly for those who are starting your career, there are huge opportunities to contribute to nutrition. And Roger said that at the get-go, in many different, coming from many different angles. Some of us around the table are deep specialists in nutrition, like Namukolo, or deep specialists in agriculture. Some of us are journalists who got converted and use those journalistic skills, right? And I think, you know, this is what it's so incredible. It's the beauty of nutrition, is that there's so many skill sets that really can lend its hand to fighting malnutrition, and it's a credible opportunity. So with that, again, thank you, Roger. Thank you, Tricia, and look forward to the rest of this discussion. And thanks to everyone who's joined us today.
So thank you very much, Sean. Sean will be sticking around to join us as the panel discussion takes shape. And Thon, thanks for bringing both the outrage and the inspiration of, I call it. The outrage, I mean, I think is really important. I mean, as you go through, you know, kind of the 45% of child deaths from poor nutrition, the 13.6 million children, you know, facing wasting during COVID. We could ask, add the stunting numbers of still nearly 1 in 4 children under 5 in our world today. 1 in 4, 22% or so stunted. That lost opportunity that Sean was talking about from the compromised physical and cognitive development from poor nutrition. This realization that it's the smallholder farmers of the world, farmers who are the hungriest, with perhaps the most malnourished families and children, and suffering through the hunger season. So all these outrages, but that's so important for the motivation, which then leads to the inspiration. And thanks for mentioning what Dr. Tilstead and you had been talking about, that this pivot from feeding the world that we had all talked about kind of in the past decades to nourishing the world and nourishing the planet and what that means. And then we'll hear more of, hey, in addition to nourishing the planet, how do we save and protect it at the same time going forward? So Sean, thanks for all that. I just wanted to also then just one follow-up to you. You kind of were giving us the global landscape, and thank you for that. Also USAID then elevating nutrition to a top priority in recent years. Can you talk some about specifically things that USAID is doing to more closely integrate agriculture and nutrition? Any examples from any of the priority countries in Feed the Future, for example?
Right. Thanks so much for that. And perhaps before I get into country examples, which are the most compelling, I'll speak at the institutional level. I think one of the problems I think of, we're in the nutrition crisis we face for 4 root causes. And one of those root causes is that nutrition is an orphan. And it's an orphan in almost every country. We work in almost every large institution. Does it belong to the health sector? Does it belong to the ag sector? Does it belong to food processors? Is it a social protection issue? Well, yes, all of the above. And you seldom have structures in government or in large organizations that bring those pieces together in a meaningful way to say, okay, Namakola, what are you going to do today? Dr. Boa, what are you going to do today? So that not everybody has to do everything everywhere, but we need to be very clear, what's the playbook and how do we bring the actors together? And so what we've done, and in fact, that's at the very heart of the Scaling Up Nutrition movement. As member countries, they really elevate that coordination of nutrition to a political level that can pull together the sectors and give them the responsibility, the resources, and hold them accountable. And at USAID, we've tried to mirror that with, we have 3 principal bureaus that invest in nutrition, are what we call pillar bureaus. The Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance, which is mainly in humanitarian and fragile settings. The Bureau of Global Health, that really looks at mainstreaming nutrition in the health system, and the Bureau of Resilience and Food Security, which is really what drives agriculture and food systems work. So we have the technical working group of nutrition advisors who are across those 3 bureaus. And then we've also elevated that to have an internal nutrition leadership council, which takes the senior management of those bureaus, as well as our regional bureaus who supervise our missions. And then my day job, among other things, is to chair that leadership council so that we're always looking at the different moving parts and how do we get them to work together. And, there are incredible examples of how you bring this together. And I will take perhaps a couple of examples that came to light during the pandemic and some of the pivots. For example, in Rwanda, where there has been great progress in many of the nutrition-specific actions, but we still face a real challenge with diets, the quality of diets of moms and kids. And one of the areas we were working on is the poultry value chain. Well, the whole market for eggs was crumbling, but there was a quick pivot of how do you actually then integrate those eggs into that social protection program so that you're both saving that poultry business, which is so important for many reasons, and you're making sure that kids who are in these social protection programs are getting an additional nutrient-rich food in their daily allocation. As today, actually, our administrator launched our refreshed global food security strategy at a White House event that just ended. And you'll see in the global food security strategy that we really embraced a food systems approach and put diets and nutrition outcomes at the very heart of our global food security strategy. So those are a couple of examples, Roger, but I'll pass it back to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Sean. And thanks for mentioning it, particularly Rwanda, which brings us then to our Dr. Chovich and Dr. Boa, kind of experts on the continent doing the work there. And I just want to start with Dr. Chovich. I mean, I noticed that you smiled when Sean mentioned that the African Union had 2022 is the year of nutrition. So what are some of the food systems challenges facing the African continent, or what should be some of the things on that agenda for 2022 of the year of nutrition? And so what's being done to raise the priority of nutrition? Yep, you're muted.
Muted centrally. We have plenty of challenges, not even just a number of challenges doesn't do it right. First of all, we know that we have widespread hunger on the continent. Over time, a lot of our agricultural policies have focused almost entirely on staple foods, grains, tubers. And so we haven't really diversified our agriculture sector as effectively as we should have in order to have more diverse food baskets that will provide the nourishment that Sean has just been talking about. And so on the continent, we have this comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, and there's been some efforts there to try and make those agriculture programs more nutrition sensitive. Plenty of challenges there as well. But the idea is to try and get agriculture to deliver better for nutrition. And so within that program, what has happened in 2015 is that we managed to add dietary indicators as one of the areas where agriculture should actually be monitored. And so we have diet diversity for children 6 to 23 months in there. Challenge is countries are not always collecting that data. The DHS surveys usually come every 4 to 5 years. So in between, you actually don't know what is happening. So our challenge is our food basket is not diverse enough to provide the nourishment that we require. We now need to diversify, and we are now also intensifying our agricultural production, except the challenges we have now is we are adopting the same production practices that have led to problems in the richer parts of the world. So the issue then is, how can we increase our production while at the same time adopt sustainable practices so that we don't damage the environment that we depend on to increase that production? And I think Kofi will probably give us some suggestions on how we can do that better. So these are the challenges that we are facing. For the UN Food Systems Summit process, a lot of African countries have developed food systems transformation pathways, and the African Union has then worked to develop a common position based on common issues across borders that could help develop momentum across the continent. These are opportunities that we have to take into next year on the year of nutrition that is going to be declared to try and do better. And I think the investments are the things that are now, we don't know where that's going to come from, but the challenges of getting the right amount of investments to get the plans that have been put in place is something that we really need to look at. Because what I see now on the continent, it's not the plans that we lack, but it's usually the investments to make those plans actually move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a really good point, that the plans or the intentions are there, but then where's the money and to follow it up, but then also the willpower, which I think then it will also be key with the African Union and the year of nutrition. And we can get more into that. Kofi was indeed smiling as you mentioned the emphasis of the need for sustainable agriculture and conservation agriculture and everything that he's been involved in. So Kofi, I mean, with your no-till agriculture center, you're leading the way in conservation agriculture in Africa. Can these efforts themselves be enough to conquer hunger and malnutrition, or what is the contribution that they then are also making to combating malnutrition? And kind of what are some of your more positive examples or favorite examples that you've seen on the ground?
Muted.
Muted.
He's muted.
You hear me now?
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Okay. No, this is very, very important, and I'm so glad to be part of this discussion today. You know, food is very essential to burden our immune system and generally our health. But it's not just any food. It's got to be grown in a certain way. It's got to be safe, diverse, and we're talking about dietary diversification, and it's got to be nutritious. But what has happened over the past several decades, extractive agricultural practices have led to degradation of several acres of land across the world. And not just that, but this coming with decreasing concentrations of the essential vitamins, minerals, and micronutrients in the food. But we are told that we are what we eat, and that we should eat our food as medicine. So naturally, our help starts with growing food on a living and healthy soil. And with this in mind, what we are saying is that it's not just the health professionals who should be concerned about regulating our health, but more so the farmers, and then the policymakers, the farmers who produce food, and the policymakers that regulate food production. Now, the biggest problem we have had has been that governments and donor agencies have treated agriculture and nutrition in isolation. And this has been very bad. And so programs and policies are tailor-made to these sectors to such an extent that even development professionals and research scientists have become sectoral specialists. But we are recognizing the processes of production and the output food, linking that to nutrition. And so agriculture, producing food, comes through to giving us good or bad nutrition. Likewise, nutrition impacting seriously on agricultural development. The biggest issue we have had, and concerns have been raised as to what is it that we can do. There is so much we can do, and the future, the present and the future is so bright. Now, we all need to embark on good agricultural practices, because good agricultural practices such as conservation agriculture is going to help us build healthy soils. Healthy soils are going to help support the growth of healthy plants to produce healthy and nutritious food to impact on human health. And this then clearly demonstrates the inextricable link between agriculture and nutrition. But what has been the problem? And this is the problem is where we're talking about treating the two as different disciplines. Now the question on that keeps coming is, can all these processes, conservation agriculture, feed the world? And I always answer this question with a question, and I say, why not? You see, people are thinking that conservation agriculture is just a tabletop sort of thing, because in most cases, especially in our part of the world, where we have most of us being smallholder farmers producing food, it is catching on more and more with smallholder farming. And people who are looking at intensive agriculture, big time agriculture being the solution to addressing hunger, thinking that this is not possible. But what we are saying is that when you are into conventional agriculture, anytime you want to scale up, you cannot, human labor becomes inefficient. At the smallholder farmer level, human labor is sufficient, but when you begin to scale up, as people are looking at large scale farming, if you don't bring in machinery, you can still not do conventional agriculture. But you see now, more than ever, and going into the future, there have been so many advances to such an extent that now we have machinery that supports scaling up these regenerative agricultural practices. And so where is the limit? If we can employ machine power, of course, we are developing processes to ensure that the smallholder farmer is able to stay on that same piece of land, keep it lively, keep it productive, profitable, farm it in an environmentally friendly manner so that we can stay on that piece of land forever. But then people that have the resources to go in big, there is no limit, because right now, instead of working the soil, turning it around, getting it prone so much to erosion, and now with climate change, leaving the soil bare through plowing, so much of the topsoil being washed away together with the nutrients that are in there. We come around saying that no, we need to have cover, more especially at planting, when the crop canopy has not closed. And we have machines. The roller crimper is there, being pioneered at the Rodale Institute. We are doing it here, have introduced that to the smallholder farmers, going through to the medium scale. So now we are able to do it such that you don't do that much damage to the soil. We are not seriously damaging the environment to such an extent that the microorganisms in the soil are always alive. And we know that the more diverse microorganisms we have in the soil, the more they are able to work the system such that plants are able to work around, assess these nutrients, and therefore leading to nutrient-dense foods. We are talking about, Chobik was talking about doing things as usual, and therefore the lack of diversity in our food systems. One of the pillars, one of the key principles of conservation agriculture is crop diversity, coming as a result of crop associations, rotations. And so once we get into this, we're able to push it all over. We are then going to ensure that it is not just that monoculture agriculture, it is agriculture controlled by a diversity of food items. And therefore, that aspect of, lack of minerals, lack of vitamins and things will not be there. But the underlying thing is that we have technology that is also suited for large scale farming, if that is what people are looking at, and it's not degrading the environment. And this is technology that is so much accepted by smallholder farmers. For instance, here where we are working, reaching out to these smallholder farmers, but then across Africa in particular, this is something not new. This type of farming is what our forefathers were doing. And people will tell you honestly that our forefathers were healthy, they were living longer, the life expectancy was higher, but what has caused that? Saying that we are what we eat, the extractive agricultural production practices that we went in has not helped us. And therefore, we bringing back practices of the old and putting science along that, said that we are able to make it more efficient. We are able to restore lands. We're able to restore nutrients in the soil. We're able to upscale productivity in a profitable and environmentally manner. And therefore, all these processes, conservation, all these concepts of regenerative agriculture climate smart agriculture, they all have conservation agriculture as the functional principle. And once we are going this way, the sky is the limit. What we need is the support from government, support from policy. The knowledge is there, and all what we also are asking is that those of us that have seen it, those of us that are in it, those of us that know what there is to do should not sit down. We should be up and doing at the farm level, kick the dirt right there with the farmers and get them to, one, know it, appreciate it, build a confidence, and go for it.
Thank you very much, Kofi. Boy, I was furiously scribbling notes. You know, you and I talking about this goes back many years, right? From when we first met in Ghana a number of years ago, and talking about this. And I know, as you said, learning from your forefathers that you know, you saw plenty on your parents' farm that inspired you to devote your life to this. And so thanks for all that, for sharing your wisdom. We'll get into some of the questions that people that you listeners and the ones participating had sent in when you registered. Just wanted to follow up with what Kofi said and Sean with Namukolo. In terms of the healthy diets that you're also so intimately involved in. So everything that Kofi was talking about, and you know, stimulating the soils, and healthy soils leading to healthy plants, and the vitamins and minerals, and the uptake of that into the crops and into the food for people. How important is all that, what Kofi's talking about, and the practices of the farmers that leads in then to the healthy, you know, diets for their families?
Well, I think if you think in terms of the production practices that we are picking up now, where we are shifting towards monoculture, and the focus that we have had primarily on staples, the implication is that we've narrowed our food basket down. So if it is all starchy food and very low density of nutrients, it doesn't help from a dietary health perspective. If we get into helpful rotational practices, and we say combine that with pulses and legumes in our crop rotation system, now we have another group that is useful in terms of providing protein and other nutrients, but at the same time, those pulses are also good for the soil. So you have your nitrogen fixation taking place in the roots. And so you can actually improve the soil structure. You can improve the levels of microorganisms that are in the soil. So by diversifying, you are also providing for better soil health. And in doing so, you can sustain food security over the long term. So these generative production practices do not only benefit the soil, they can also benefit the food basket by adding to the diversity of the food that we've got available to us. It's really a win-win situation for diets and for the soil if we adopt regenerative production practices that include rotations that actually provide a better diverse basket for us. Yeah, over to you.
Excellent, thank you. I guess I have a number of questions, but we've had so many that were really good that were sent in by people, as I said, as they were registering. And I think since we're at the World Food Prize and you know, with Dr. Tilstead, the new laureate for this year, maybe we can start off with a question from Catherine Bertini, one of the laureates in the past, former head of the World Food Program, my colleague at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. And you've all mentioned this and referred to this, and Catherine's wondering, you know, do we need a structural change with governments to ensure that agriculture, health collaborations, you know, on nutrition, so that nutrition is the center of them? Sean talked about that, yeah, nutrition's often been the orphan crop, and Dr. Chovich and Dr. Bo, you both mentioned this as well, as kind of nutrition being ignored. And it's always fallen somewhere in between. And I've often wondered, look, there's there's ministries of agriculture, there's ministry of health. Nutrition's both part of them, but both agriculture and health ministries are saying, well, it's not us that's supposed to be responsible for nutrition. And I've often wondered, is it not high time that we start having ministries of nutrition in our governments? You know, I mean, Sean's kind of the chief nutritionist at USAID, so you're kind of that in the United States. We need to get you on the cabinet, a cabinet level position. But yeah, so Namakolo, I mean, is that something that could come up in the African Union? Or what do you think needs to be, to answer, you know, Catherine's question, kind of what reorganization or what new impulses need to be coming from governments, not only African governments, but the governments of the world. So if you all want to contribute, you know, answer to that, that's great. So Dr. Cho.
I don't necessarily think a Ministry of Nutrition would be very helpful. Nutrition is such a multi-sectoral concept and an issue to deal with that a Ministry of Nutrition would be an entire government duplicated. Agriculture, water, what have you. So it doesn't help us. So it's not so much restructuring the government that we need, it's more restructuring the way in which the different sectors work together. We talk about multi-sectoral nutrition now, and sometimes we even talk about agriculture and health and whoever doing things for nutrition, and a lot of these interventions must coalesce for the individual child. So if the agriculture go to the other village and do their interventions, and the water are in the other district doing their bit, and then the guys that are doing vaccinations and vitamin A supplementation are someplace else, no child gets the full complement of interventions that they actually require. So it actually calls for us to reshape the way in which we work so that all our interventions align and coalesce for an individual household, so that we are not missing any child with any one intervention. Because you can provide the food, but if the water is not safe, that food is not going to be helpful to the children or the mothers or whoever eats it. You can provide the clean water, but water alone, again, doesn't work in the absence of a good, diverse diet. And so you really need these interventions coalescing at the household level. And we need to then restructure the way we work to make sure that those alignments actually do take place. Otherwise, we will never get the kinds of outcomes that we want for the 2030 goals that we are so far behind in reaching now, with COVID also coming to mess us up even more. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Sean.
I just to really endorse what Namakolo has said, to perhaps build on it for 2 points, that all those sectors that Namakolo said have very specific technical expertise. So it's not that you want to have, I mean, one ministry cannot duplicate all those technical expertise, right? There's very specific things in agriculture you need, in water, et cetera. The issue is, how do you elevate that coordination? Because, you know, just the way government works anywhere, line ministries don't like to report to other line ministries. You've got to have some boss. You know, I'm an opera fanatic. You need to have a conductor in the orchestra pit, keeping everybody singing. Everybody, the orchestra, the singers, everybody's playing their role. And that's what you need. And we have good examples of that. In my second home, Senegal, nutrition is under Conseil National de Développement de la Nutrition at the Prime Minister's cabinet level, or the President's cabinet level. So it doesn't duplicate the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Health, or the Ministry of Social Protection. It says, how do we work together in exactly this way that Namakolo has called out? So absolutely, we need structural reform, but it's not creating new, it's not duplicating ministries. It's defining very clearly what each sector needs to do, giving them resources and holding them accountable. And I bring that back to, I think, Namakolo, the issue you pointed out is that the plans are there, the political will to invest is not, because that's also where you need to elevate that voice that ministers of finance see that this is something we absolutely need to invest in if we're going to care about, if we're going to truly become emerging economies.
Good. Thank you, Sean. So great wisdom. Kofi. Whoop, mute. You're muted again.
I'm
There
so
we go.
happy. Yeah, I'm so glad to know that the AU is christening 2022 the year of nutrition. This is very, very important. But you see, what we want to see is that, and for me personally, I would expect that government and development agencies within the AU fully accept the intricate bi-directional interactions between agriculture and nutrition. Then this is what will be good for the soil, for humanity, and for the environment. And this is exactly what we need. And so, barring anything, 2022 should see us seeing that bi-directional interaction. And we expect that a lot of efforts in terms of funding, in terms of advocacy, and things within the AU are geared towards this intricate bi-directional interactions. Anything less will leave us in the same situation that we have been for a very long time and where we are now.
Thank you. Yeah, no, and what we're hearing from everybody, and this is it's really powerful, is that everything needs to work together, right? And we all know that again intuitively. It's not just agriculture, it's not just nutrition, it's not just water, it's not just education, it's not just infrastructure, it's not just health issues, but they all kind of come together because each impinges on the other. And so, yeah, my misguided notions of a ministry of nutrition, but maybe kind of a tsar or a chief nutritionist, would be good. Someone with the ability to kind of bring people together and say, okay, if we're each going to make progress in all the things that we want to do, we all got to come together and we move in the same direction because they're so overlapping, on this. We also had
Roger, there's a very good example at the moment in Ethiopia that seems to be really moving things. They've got an approach called the Scotta Declaration that they have been working with. And usually it's been very difficult to demonstrate reductions in stunting based on agriculture interventions. And they've just had Johns Hopkins University has done an evaluation of their innovation phase for that program. And they have actually demonstrated quite significant impacts of agriculture on reducing stunting in under 2-year-old children. And really the thing that has worked is they have taken this multi-sectoral approach, but they have done it in such a way that they've tried to have it well coordinated, getting this idea of coalescing interventions at households. And I think if we can figure out and do better at coordinating our actions, even with what we are already doing, we can have better impacts. The problem now is that with the multiple interventions that we are having, if they are not well aligned and coordinated, then they actually become a waste of resources because they are not helping. So this business of coordination that Sean was referring to is really critical, and having a central place to which the different line ministries are reporting to that can look to see that, oh, here things are not aligned, perhaps you guys should move over there. That would actually help. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I think as you were mentioning and talking about Ethiopia, that, there and in other countries that say on stunting, as you mentioned, that once the recognition of, wow, here's the cost to individuals, to families, to our nation as a whole, to our region, of stunting. And again, this 1 in 4 in certain parts of Africa, 1 in every 3 children under 5 being stunted. And it's a life sentence of underachievement and underperformance. And the cost of that, then that prioritizes, that in country. And then if everybody's kind of pushing in the same direction on that. But this also leads really nicely into the question that Alan Hruska from Michigan State University had asked is, what metrics should be used for nutrition outcomes? Is that shifting is all or changing some as we, kind of look at the elevating the importance of nutrition? Sean, I know this is, particularly in your wheelhouse, both now and in your previous posts.
Yeah, and I think I'm also going to ask Namakolo to speak because
please, yes.
Probably you have a huge, I think that as important as it was to elevate stunting, but other forms of malnutrition, where I think we need to focus on these outcome indicators of actually changing nutritional status, of understanding it will take some time to move those. And particularly when you're talking about the agricultural sector, and Namakolo, you said this, of what really, where we need to see the change is in diets. And I go back and I think, just to give some additional data points to what Namakolo you had raised, and I think, again, I'm quoting one of your IFPRI colleagues, if you look just how unaffordable these nutritious foods are, it's really stunning. So I look at an egg. Egg is not the solution to everything, but we know it's a very nutritious food and it's moms and kids love them. If you're living in Niger, egg in calorie equivalents, an egg calorie is 23.3 times more expensive than staple calories. So if we as a public health nutritionist, I'm counseling moms, eat an egg every day, give an egg to your child. In fact, we're being ridiculous, right? Of saying, so if we're not, so I think, and this is something that I think the agriculturalists understand, that they can very much see themselves in the diets because the link between what you grow and what you eat is so clear, and understanding also innately that, you wouldn't feed your livestock as poorly as we feed our infants, right? That they need not just cassava, they need actually nutritious diets for poultry and livestock to produce. So I think that focus of really understanding what are the diets, what's the cost of those diets, are probably some of the indicators that are the most critical for the food systems. And of course, over time, we're going to see changes in nutritional status, as Namakolo has said. But I think in the immediate term, is that really honing on diets, and particularly diets of the people most at risk of malnutrition, so moms and kids, and going back to even within a country, and even when you're talking about moms and kids, what segments of the population are really not being able to access those foods. But I really want to have Namakolo weigh in because she lives and breathes this on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Namakolo,
you see, the thing is, a lot of times also the context matters, right? Because definitely affordability, but sometimes even when there are foods that could be used that might be affordable, might not be used. This morning I was in a meeting where we were looking at a PhD students project in the northern part of Zambia. It's an area that has got a lot of water bodies. Fish is readily available, but small sardine-like little fish that are eaten whole. They also have bigger fish. These are fishing communities. They sell the big fish. But they don't give the little fish to the babies because they think because it's a whole fish, the child is going to choke on it. So the children actually don't benefit. So they have very high stunting levels in an area that is abundant with fish. From a nutrition perspective, we know that eating a whole fish, those little ones, is even better than having a fleshy fish where you leave the bones away, because you're eating the whole animal essentially. So in terms of nutrients, they are loaded. So it is important to look at not just the need for nutrients, but also what is available in those localities that we might be able to leverage as low-hanging fruit. And yes, with the production, then the production practices will need to work for us to make sure that the foods that are produced are actually affordable to the communities, which is where I think looking at what is available in the area can sometimes help, and we don't always pay enough attention to what else can we do. In the same token, we are losing our traditional consumption practices, where we're looking down on some of our traditional and indigenous foods that can actually help. They won't solve all problems, but they can definitely help. And we're losing those in transition, aspiring for potato chips and aspiring for sweets and what have you. And that doesn't help us. So on the one hand, we should be looking at production, but on the other, we should also look at the encroachment of unhelpful consumption patterns that are not really helpful. There was a project in Ethiopia where people were selling eggs to go and buy sugar. I mean, you'd rather give the child the egg than go buy the sugar. But this is where I'm saying sometimes it's also knowledge and ongoing traditional practices sometimes that don't even allow you to feed the child the food that you've got available to you that is good for the child because there are taboos and what have you associated with it. So we need to look at the context of the locality to really be able to address the issues effectively, because sometimes there are things in the locality that you might be able to do different that will actually help. But by not looking at what's there, we miss out on some of those low-hanging fruits that we might leverage.
Thank you, Dr. Troward. Really good thoughts. And I was thinking about this and a couple of questioners, and then we've kind of touched on it on the panel on the issue of climate change. And I know that there's been some examples and great concern and worry that climate change, and Kofi, you're on the front lines of this, is not only impacting, say the productivity and the yields and the harvest of farmers, and particularly smallholder farmers, but that it's also impacting the nutritional value of crops. And so Marie Conant from World Vision had submitted a question. So what's the evidence that climate change is contributing to the reduction of the nutritional content of foods? Kofi, have you been seeing that, or your farmers, or Sean? Kofi, you're on mute again. Kofi, on mute. There you go.
I mean, you don't have to look far to get answers to this. What really is happening is farmers are seeing this right on the farms. Now, climate change is impacting seriously, negatively on agriculture. I mean, look at what is happening with the floods. The traditional practices now of the clean seed bed preparation. If there is so much of the topsoil which has the bulk of the nutrients that may get into the plant from which we eat and get all this in us, then what really is happening is that the more we get climate change impacting on these processes of moving tons and tons of topsoil away, we are actually getting all these nutrients eroded out of the soil. There is no soil that gets washed away and leaves the nutrients in it behind. And so, yes, for sure. And so the plant will take whatever is there. And if the rich nutrients are gone, then there is nothing good that is going to go into the plant for us to take. Now, I also indicated that, look at the heat we're having and look at our cropping practices. On the bare soil, the microorganisms are at risk. They either die or relocate, both the macro and the microorganisms. But you see, diversity in the microorganisms at the root tip is so important because that helps to cycle the different types of nutrients, not just the macronutrients, but the micronutrients which contribute so much to food quality, not just abundance, but quality. And so if we get depletion of the numbers of these microorganisms as a result of climate change coming from escalated temperatures, then we are compromising on the rich nutrients in the soil that go into the plant to be taken up by man. And so in all this, all that is happening is that we are increasingly then getting devoid of nutrient-dense food following climate change. I mean, we're talking about all these foods. Now, because of climate change, the emphasis on breeding and the agricultural emphasis has always been go for this, resistance, this, and we are neglecting our traditional foods. When you go into ecological farming, food sovereignty comes up strongly. And you see, these are native food crops that are able to mine, that are very well adapted to the field conditions, and they're able to mine effectively nutrients, rich nutrients in the soil. But then because of the effect of climate change, this is where we are being told, this is what you need. And therefore the emphasis gets, we get to a point where we begin to de-emphasize the traditional foods and then come in with other things that will, in effect, demand a whole lot of external inputs in terms of soil amendment, in terms of chemicals, and that comes to disrupt the whole nutrient availability, the nutrient system of the plant. And so in effect, a lot of the things that we are doing in trying to mitigate climate change, in trying to adapt to climate change, because climate change has become so rare. Some of these practices and processes and recommendations are also drawing us back in terms of the nutritional status of our crops. But like I keep saying, once we begin to go into more of these regenerative agricultural practices, once we begin to appreciate the fact that we need to ensure that we are able to work in such a way that we do very minimal disturbance to the soil, we're keeping the soil, we're keeping resilience, building resilience in the soil to such an extent that it will resist climate change. Now, what farmers are seeing is that these agricultural practices, especially conservation agriculture that we are at the forefront promoting, is cushioning them against the extremes of climate change. People are getting stable yields, and not just the yields, but they are seeing that there is value in terms of whatever the taste. And farmers do not have opportunity. They do not have any access to be able to assess in detail the nutrient status of the food, but just the look of it and then the taste. Going by this one, they tell you this tastes like the older people now will tell you, oh, this cabbage, this lettuce, this cucumber tastes like the olden day cucumber. And so what we are saying is that we should embrace these regenerative agricultural processes, which will help build resilience in the system to such an extent that we wouldn't be forced to take things that are being pushed into the system that might not be so right as far as climate change is concerned. Because climate change is real, it's impacting on agriculture, but then we can find solutions in the adoption of regenerative agricultural practices.
Thank you very much, Kofi, particularly for bringing us and that the thoughts and the very keen wisdom of the farmers, that you're working with, and being able to apply that back to now things are tasting and looking like the way they used to, and the stability of yields and harvests that you're talking about, that then is so important to them, particularly in these days of climate change and so many things shifting on the ground. Sean, in terms of climate change and nutrition.
Yeah, and I, obviously, Kofi, you've touched on it, and certainly there is evidence that the temperature increases do have some impacts on the nutritional quality of crops. I guess what I was going to add is that that's obviously important, but it's also just a subset of the impacts of climate change on nutrition. Because in addition, it is undermining people's livelihoods. It's increasingly difficult to access water, and we know what an enormous burden, both the direct impacts of lack of access to water, but also the incredible burden, particularly on women's time, if they have to go further to reach water. It's changing disease patterns, et cetera. So much like the Standing Together for Nutrition Consortium did to bring together these multiple pathways that the pandemic is having impacts on nutrition, we need to also have that multi-sectoral, multi-pathway analysis of what the climate crisis is doing to nutrition. And the quality of the nutrient quality of crops is an important pathway, but it's only one pathway. And unfortunately, that's being magnified by these other pathways, which are undermining nutrition gains.
Yep. Thank you, Sean. Again,
I think if I can add to that, an additional aspect is also that farmers actually struggle making their planting decisions because the weather is so variable. The signs that they used to have on when they're going to plant, when the harvest, now the rain comes late, comes too early, stops in the middle, all these create really challenges where sometimes when you talk to farmers, they will actually tell you it's difficult to decide when to plant now because we never know what's going to happen. So the unpredictability of weather has also adds to the challenges, because then maybe they plant too late and then they don't get the right harvest because the growing season has now been shortened. So I think the variability in climate, in weather, as a result of climate change also adds this other dimension of really messing up cropping decisions for farmers.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for mentioning that, Namukola. Hey, so one other question or topic that a number of questioners have also raised, in particular, Julie Howard, who I think we all know, a great leader over the years in the importance of science and research in agriculture and to feed the future and her role there. She's wondering about and asking, about in conflict areas, should we be talking more about agriculture, nutrition priorities in conflict areas instead of relying, or in the absence of that, do we continue to just rely on kind of food aid, relief aid that goes into those areas? So is there anything that, particularly in the conflict areas, that are causing the perpetuation of so much hunger and malnutrition in our world, particularly on agriculture and the nutrition front? So yeah, Namukola, if you want to tackle that, or Sean.
Well, conflict is not good for agriculture at all. It's kind of difficult to work in the field when you are running away from bullets or whatever it is you're running away from. So it really disrupts agricultural activities. People get displaced, so they end up in areas where they actually don't have land there. Where they have arrived, the people who are there now look at them as additional people that now need land to produce. So you get conflicts actually developing just as a result of the displacement itself. And so I think the big thing in terms of dealing with conflict is the first thing is to just recognize how disruptive it is to food production activities, because it's just impossible to do it in such a situation. So people would then, of course, need food aid in some way. But I think there should also be some planning that looks at, as the conflict resolves, if it resolves, God willing, how do you build back? How do you help people resettle? How do you help them reestablish themselves in such a way that right from the start, they are establishing a diverse food basket and not starting off with just cereals and nothing else? So conflict is a difficult one to deal with when it comes to agriculture because of how disruptive it is. You have to be still in one place to actually produce food. And so I think, if anything, it should be used as an incentive to those that are wreaking havoc in terms of conflict, to say, you know, this can't happen because of the following. But it's a difficult one. It is a difficult one. Food aid definitely needed, because it's impossible to produce food. The best you can do is to try and plan for, when you are resettling people, how do you help them best so that they can get back on their feet? Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And certainly, as we see in kind of the camps of internally displaced or refugees from conflict, the large majority of them, at least the ones that I have met over the years, are farmers themselves. So they're the ones being displaced. It's their territory that a lot of the conflict is being fought over. You know, you so eloquently put it, it's hard to farm when you're, you know, fleeing and being chased by bullets and people with guns that are following you. And so, yeah, ending that is Kofi. Any thoughts? Again, you're muted. There we go.
Yes, fine. That is interesting. And Chobi actually touched on that issue very well. You see, people cannot just get out. Agriculture is very strenuous, especially in conflict areas when people have just come back. They definitely need support. And that support at that particular moment to be giving them food. But this is where most of the time we get it wrong, because food coming from outside, from the donor, from wherever, is not the food. It might not be necessarily the food that is the natives know so much. And so, but just to be able to have some energy to stand up, it's so good that people will have to be given food. But this is where we have an opportunity to start getting them into proper farming. This is because at this point they have come back, and having come back, they have lost everything. So we are starting with them. And when we are starting with them, that is where we have to start with these regenerative agricultural processes, so that food aid, good, to be able to get them the energy to stand up, to work for themselves, but develop the production practices such that we are going to ensure sustainable production, profitable agriculture, and agriculture that is not going to degrade the environment. It's unfortunate, but then it creates opportunity for us. It creates opportunity for development agencies to start with people that are now coming up with good agricultural practices. Because for us farmers, when we get to appreciate the value of a good system, we live with it. And that is why people are saying that regenerative agriculture is suffering because of the change of mindset, trying to bring something that is different from what people have been doing. But at this point, they have no other thing apart from what you are teaching them. And so give them food to stand on their feet, but then start pushing sustainable agriculture through the regenerative process. And that will catch on with them.
Thank you very much, Kofi. So we're coming close to the end of our time, and I wanted to make sure that this is kind of one of the most important parts of these university speaker panels for every occasion that we've done them, is now it's time for the panelists to all kind of, to all the students listening in on Zoom, on Facebook, however you're tuning into this. So panelists, any one call to action you have for the students, so our next generation of food systems leaders, any advice, any thoughts as they continue their studies, any career advice? This is a particularly exciting time, full of opportunity. So anything that you would want to say to them? We can start off with Kofi.
Yes. See, we're so glad that students are listening to this series, and thank so much to Farm Journal for making it possible. But what I want students to realize is that they are in school today, burden themselves for secured job, be it working for themselves, for other people, or for industry. But outside school, it is not just the rich knowledge that matters so much, but how one is able to get that rich knowledge to show up as professional outputs. Because, and so what we are saying is that they should be able to build themselves in knowledge, but also in the practical skills of the implementation of this knowledge. Because they will never ever sound convincing enough as change agents and attract clients if even they begin to work for themselves, if they have nothing tangible to show. So it boils down to the fact of burden themselves in knowledge in whatever aspect, whatever discipline they are in, but then the practical implementation of whatever is in the brain should show up on the field. And in all cases, no matter the discipline, people should realize, students should realize that their health matters so much. And there is a big connection between agriculture and nutrition. And so whatever they are, wherever they are, whatever they do, they should uphold this and help to push this inextricable interdependency every day.
Thank you very much, Kofi, and for particularly that point of nutrition and agriculture, because that's precisely one of the questions that Connor McCabe at University of California, Davis, he had specifically asked about, any advice on, what we can do to break down barriers, encourage students so that students understand the link between agriculture and nutrition. So thanks for raising that. Damakolo, any thoughts, any charges, any inspiration for the students?
Yes, for the students, what I would like to say to you is, do not be bound by what others have done before you. I think we look to you, a new generation, for ideas to do things different. And I want to touch on something that is actually in the chat now on irrigation, for example. Yes. Those huge center pivot things that you see in the US and Europe, very wasteful of water. So if you come to Africa to help us, don't bring them with you. think about something different that you can do that is more environmentally friendly, that is better adapted, something that will help move us in a positive direction as far as food systems transformation is. Take the low level of development of our agriculture and food systems as an opportunity to try different things and to chart a different direction for the continent. So if your aspirations are to come to the African continent to help, that's what I would like you to come with fresh ideas, take the low level of development as an opportunity to do things different and to chart a different direction on food systems for the continent. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Namukolo, for saying that, because it really links back to some of the things that Sean was talking about earlier, very early on, and starting us off with his keynote. And particularly, Sean, your first of your words, learn, which is related to listen. So as Namukolo says, yes, when you come with your new innovations and ideas, but then also be listening to what the people on the ground and in those communities are saying in terms of what is appropriate and kind of the things that are needed. So Sean, to you for final words to perhaps link back to what you started off with at the beginning.
Great, thanks. Probably three things of it there's actually a relative dearth of talent in nutrition globally. I think that we finally got nutrition back on the agenda, but been so underinvested for so long that I think, and you're seeing across multiple sectors, you need that nutrition talent. So I think across the board, there is a real need for people who have an understanding of nutrition and come from their sector. Secondly, I spent 40 years of my life in nutrition, and you never get bored. In one day, in a single day, you can speaking to a plant breeder once about how do you increase the nutrient content of a sweet potato, to speaking to a food technologist about how do you encapsulate a given nutrient, to speaking with a lactation consultant about how do you optimally support moms to breastfeed. I mean, the wealth of things you need to, because nutrition is so complex, as we all said, it really keeps you on your toes your entire career. And then thirdly, and I think, Kofi, this links back to what you said, in school, you get real in-depth in your technical area. And that's obviously incredibly important. You need to bring your technical expertise to the table, no matter what it is, from journalism to mega data analysis, to plant breeding, to dietetics. But in real life, I find I draw on that technical knowledge maybe 5% of the time. 95% of your life is how do you actually work in partnership, get systems to perform and do better for the people we need to serve. And so really understanding those diplomatic systems, people skills, which often you don't get necessarily taught in school. The technical expertise is absolutely essential, but then understanding context and how do you apply evidence to context is absolutely critical. So back over to you. And a huge thanks to everyone for organizing this.
Well, thank you, Sean. Thanks for those words, and Kofi and Namukolo. Nutrition, if that's the byword. So in the past, and It's a Wonderful Life, it's plastics, right? Getting the plastics. No, nutrition. I think is what we're hearing from Kofi. Soils, right, are so important as well. So I'll just my charge kind of as moderator, my moderator's prerogative then with the final words is, look, individuals matter. You can make a difference in this imperative to both nourish the planet and save the planet that we've been talking about. And again, to repeat what we've all been saying, whatever you study, whatever your skill set, wherever your career takes you, if you have a passion to join the fight to end hunger and malnutrition, please do. And there's something that each of you can do, each and every one of you. Be imaginative, be creative. There's a way for each of you to make a great contribution, to make a difference, and to lead the way, and to inspire, please. So we're counting on all of you to carry on with this and to lead. And you're already doing such. By your interest, by your participation in this panel, in this conference. So please lead the way and be the inspiration for us all. So on that note, thank you all for joining us. So back to Tricia to wrap it up. So here we are.
So it's my job to say thank you first to our stellar panelists. I mean, just very inspiring conversation today. There's a lot of important work to be done. We can see it at the structural policy level and down to, as Dr. Chovich said, I love this, looking at the context of the locality. I've had those same kinds of conversations with Kofi over time as well. So thank you for those comments. And as Roger said, individuals matter, and that's the hopeful piece of this, the conversation today, and that we can all play a role in this. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We know there are lots of great choices of content during the World Food Prize in particular. Really glad to have you with us and the students who have participated. Thank you to our partners and sponsors. We look forward to seeing you on November 12th for our next installment of our speaker series. We'll be at the AFA Leaders Conference live in Kansas City, but broadcasting globally. And we'll be leading a panel, an amazing panel, a discussion around diversity in agriculture. So we're looking forward to that. Thank you all for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.